As the chair to allow one public speaker, and that is Mike Sorbolo. Mr. Sorbolo?
Yes, thank you.
Please identify yourself for the record.
Yes, thank you very much on my dad. I apologize for not being able to make it earlier. My name is Mike Sorbolo. I'm here about myself. I have taught all grades. I was fortunate enough to be a uncertified teacher. They were desperate. I have a technical background in science and math. The reason I'm here is I went to Deerfield Beach High School as a student, and in Rapid City, where I spent a number of years, Rapid City unfortunately was the first community to have a student walk in with a shotgun. And as we all know, our community has had some serious things happen lately as well. In fact, I'm not going to ask you questions. I know you can't answer, but it is a federal statistic, not mine, it's not my opinion, that 1 out of 5 children before reaching the age of 18 has been exposed to something that has met a degree of criminal prosecutability, not just something that would make a parent upset. And this is our government's federal statistics. These come out every 4 years. They are not mentioned. I do not know why. But here's the deal. There is nobody between those kids and what's happening to them other than you. There's no one who has a hat whose job it is. The people who gather the statistics, our federal government, also gather statistics on how much salad they're eating and a bunch of other things. That's what's published. This statistic has been out there for a decade. I wrote about it 15 years ago. I'm not the only one. I don't want to discuss this statistic. That's not why I'm here. It is 1 out of 5. You can look it up. So whose job is it? You are the only ones who can do anything. Okay? First off, how can you do it? It's not your job. Who's going to let you? And what can be done? Triage. You can find out what the numbers are. For our students, 250,000 students, real numbers. It's called anonymous polling. If it cost $1 million, I could ask you for $1 million and you'd be all impressed and give it to me. It involves a penny. You flip a penny. You ask the students. You tell them. If it's heads, you say yes. If it's tails, you answer the question. I had planned on giving you each a penny and inquiring as to whether your favorite pie was apple or pumpkin. It's a bit complicated because you can't answer, so I'm going to skip ahead. We could still do it. I could ask you to write on a piece of paper. Pick the top or the bottom. I could ask you to do it now if I can't ask you for your permission. But let's say you were to write on a piece of paper. I'd say, okay, pick one. You pick the top or the bottom. I'd say, okay, call the top heads, bottoms, tails. Now, if it were children, I can phrase this much more carefully. 3 minutes is the end of the day. It could be phrased as, and you will spend hours deliberating this. Believe me, the question can be phrased. Has anything happened that you were uncomfortable, that you felt trapped and you couldn't share with an adult? It could be that simple, and you can have an answer that will not upset parents. It won't upset the kids. If I ask, excuse me for pointing, but one of you, whether your favorite pie is apple or whatever, you won't tell me. But I can ask all of you. You'll say heads, heads, tails, tails, heads, 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 tails, tails. None of you will know whose favorite pie or whatever. Okay, so we can ask our children these tough questions. That is not an excuse. I'm out of time?
Okay. Yes, you wrap up, please.
To wrap up, please consider, and perhaps we should have a discussion. We could have a meeting, board meetings, talk with you people, whatever is necessary. One thing I was very encouraged, you are all so motivated, and we're all talking about money. Please don't think about any of these things. It's not an issue of money. It is an issue of acknowledging that there's a problem and then worrying about it. If a child is on fire, and that's what we're talking about, this is literal abuse, and they're on fire now, not next month, not last month, it's not someone else's kids. As we're speaking, out of 250,000 kids, students, 50 are newly being abused as we're speaking. And they're on fire, in pain now, this second. So it is not a matter of whose hat is it. The CDC quietly changed the rules on everyone and mentioned, oh, by the way, this is transmittable community-wise. Not familially, not within families. But if you're born within a community that starts to exhibit these problems, culturally, our brains respond. I can be raised in a convent. My brain will respond to what your children do. Do you understand this? If you don't, you need to. It is your responsibility. It is not a matter of a child being abused and they'll get over it. It is a physical change. It is not that they are thinking short.
Sir,
They
your time
are
is
short.
up.
Their legs have been cut off. Sorry. Flip the coin, please. I would love to talk to you at a later point about this. It is very important. All our kids, we can find out now what the real numbers are. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. The business of the School Board of Broward County is now complete, and I am adjourning this meeting. Thank you, everyone. A long day.
Without having all of you toss a penny, I just tried to wing it, which I do apologize for. You are the good guys. I want to emphasize that. Part of what I've been trying to communicate with you is I have dealt with the community and taught and tried to push some bullying things through at a school in Rapid City, South Dakota, and discovered, much to my amazement, that there was a communication problem. I don't know how to explain it other than to say that it seems to take longer to explain things than it should. And I think part of the problem is we're literally facing the wrong direction. It's not a matter of targeting bullying kids or targeting teachers that are bullying or administrators that aren't doing their jobs. What we're dealing with is we need to target the culture of bullying at the schools. And we need to model the behavior we want them to learn. And we need to not have them be punished. School is not a place for punishment, it's a place for learning. In fact, in your own documents, it says in regard to discipline of teachers at least, and administrators, that it is supposed to be for the purpose of, it doesn't use the word education, I think the word is correction. Well, we need to have that attitude with our students. If a student is bullying, I've never seen a happy kid that bullies. One of the young men who was involved in this bullying incident that you just discussed with Mrs. Brown made the national news. We're in the national news all the time. What was it, the Broward Cops show or something like that? You know, these kids aren't happy. They're screaming for help and we're not able to respond. And I did contact you at one time and I used some metaphors. To give you an example of how difficult this is, the metaphors literally seem to be not understood, and there's a reason for that. And it gets worse every year. And everyone knows what to do and kind of feels something is wrong. No one feels empowered to take action. My reason for using the harsh language earlier, kids on fire, was not, because I know you know metaphors, and yet you did bring in, you know, the next meeting, by odd coincidence, a fire marshal to receive an award. When I used the metaphor of, you know, I wanted to provide you with a large stick so you could use it to bring some of these motions through. When I've spoken with Mrs. Brown, she likes lots of the people she deals with and wants to see change happen, but she's afraid of speaking for that change because she doesn't want to intrude on what she views as good versus bad people. There are no good versus bad people. It's not about individuals. A good person, if they see someone making a bunch of noise, will say, good, I wanted to do something about that anyway. I'm going to use that person making noise to accomplish something. That is what I meant by a big stick. You just meant the big stick. Nothing personal, Monica. But that's a metaphor. These are simple changes. I would like to see the school board right now, right here, if it's not an emergency, if people don't use the word emergency, if the 1 out of 5 statistic isn't enough to frighten the pants off of everyone, newsflash, our statistics are worse than the national average. It's not 1 out of 5 kids in crisis in Broward schools, and we all know that. So in a committee, I know it's difficult, and I hate to look at you, Mr. Superintendent, but you know, it's harder for them to stand up as individuals. I think someone needs to say, this is an emergency. Maybe you are or aren't worse than other schools, but unless you state it as an emergency, it's not that you aren't doing wonderful things with Motorola and other things. This does not detract from that.
Okay, Michael, your 3 minutes is absolutely wrap up.
I appreciate that. I will wrap up real quickly, because the next thing after you face the word that the fact there's an emergency is we need to do triage and find out where, what, you know, not who and how, okay, but we need to target the culture. In other words, it's the concept that you can have 1,000 kids put into a building with 100 adults, and you train those adults, and most of them think it's illegal, and I do want to mention this. What is it, FERPA does not say that it's illegal to anonymously poll and come up with real hard numbers on individual schools and what the numbers are. In other words, which schools have a culture of bullying? Which schools have a culture within the education? Because it can be teachers and administrators that have that bullying attitude as well. Which schools are those? We can know that. There is no law against teachers anonymously polling their students, and that was what I was talking about previously with the coin toss polling. I've had 15,000 hits, mostly here in South Florida, and I know you're having a bullying meeting coming up next week. I know you met with the governor just a few weeks ago up in Boca High. I doubt this is being discussed as an emergency basis. Okay, I would like to see one of you now, today, be willing to say it's an emergency, and you will be called upon to do this again. I realize it's a scary, frightening thing to take a step like that, but I'm asking you right now, and I'm aware of the rules as to you can't respond, but I also am aware that you can do anything you want if you wish. So I am asking you officially, for any one of you or all of you together, say, yeah, this is an emergency, we're going to deal with it, we're going to reach out to people such as myself and Monica and find solutions.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off, sir.
Thank you, I understand.
And realize also that we do not make any public response to any presentations at this time.
If the child is on fire in front of you,
We
you
do
should
not
yell.
make any
I apologize
public
for
response
interrupting.
at this time, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Mr. Khan, are we ready to proceed?
I don't know that Mr. Soto is here just yet.
Ian Sargent. Michael Cervola.
My name is Michael Cervola, Deerfield Beach, and I've spoken, this is the third time. Last time I was here, I was rather confrontational, although I used my best low tone, and it didn't come across the way I expected. I challenged you to use the word emergency in order to empower you to action, so you could take action that apparently you thought you couldn't before. I'm not going to ask you to use the word emergency today. I don't believe it's necessary. I am here to communicate that we can know how many kids were bullied, not in 2011 or 2012, not statistically, but how many kids in individual schools, for example, Deerfield Beach Middle, or pick a school, we can know how many were bullied last week and compare it to this week. And then next week, we can say, oh look, there's 10 more kids being bullied this week, or 10 more kids that say that they're considering suicide or something of that nature, and we can address it. Okay, we do not have that capability now, and that is what I'm talking about. And it's very simple to accomplish. I did bring some signs, which you were very graciously allowing, which is this. I can hold it up. I also want to add, even though I limited myself to 2 signs, I don't think anyone will complain. And I did agree not to walk with these in front of any schools because I don't want to be divisive. We're all on the same side in this. I think there can be no doubt as to that. Okay, this is a powerful tool that will provide numbers. No one need be afraid of numbers. No one will be held accountable or liable if you discover that 8 out of 10 kids are in crisis, or 6 out of 10, or 4 out of 10. The national numbers, although everyone agrees they're wrong, is 1 out of 5 are in serious crisis or have been victimized. I've never heard anyone say that that number is low. Okay, please take out a penny, toss it. Let me ask you a personal question. If the answer, if it's heads, you say yes. I can ask you all if you're gay, okay? Flip the coin. You'll say yes or no. I won't know whether you're responding to the head on the coin or to the truth. But when I take all of you together, if there's 100 of you, I know that 50% should have said yes or no based on the flip of the coin. So it's very easy for me to then come back to you and say, hey, guess what? 20% of the people on this board are gay, but none of you are marked out, okay? We can ask children personal questions without any intrusion of rights. And by the way, we speak a lot about adult rights. I never hear anyone talk about the rights of children to be safe. They're little people, okay, but they are not adults. They should never be put in jail. If you want to put kids in jail, then write it into the law. Say, we won't want to put kids in jail at 17, or 16, or 15, or 14, or 13, or 12, or 11. They cannot clamp shut on being children just because we call them students or because they step over a line. I believe I may have exceeded my time. The clock is doing strange things, but
Yes, if you could wrap up, Mr. Cibola, please.
Because of what has just happened, I think I pretty much thank you for the signs because I talked too much. But I did want to say one more thing in regard to what just happened, and I will use this time, I apologize for this, but that teacher who was a hero, her heroism had to shine through the system which you represent. Not that you're bad, but the system, okay, forced her mind to make an excuse. When I heard the interview, her first thought was to apologize to you, to the things you represent. She apologized. She said, this is a quote, "I know I shouldn't have said I love the children." She not only apologized for that, but she went on to explain that the reason was because she thought it would be the last thing they ever heard. What type of system is it that a teacher feels she has to make an explanation in the first place or apologize? And that also means, by the way, as it happened, as that person was there, her brain had to actually process, and part of her brain was saying, oh, this is something you shouldn't say. Another part had to say, countermand that and say, oh no, it's a man outside with a gun, go ahead and say it. That fraction of a second, we are all accountable for. Her brain, that blood shouldn't have been flowing to that part of her brain. There should be no part of anyone's brain that says, I can't tell a first grader that I love them. Teachers do not appreciate, because we have not instructed them properly as to what the real job is there. It's not to get good grades. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate the time. I went way over. Thank you. This woman has something very
Juliet
important to say. Please listen.
Mr. Runcie and the school board members, I am so confused. One, let me remind you of the case that was filed against me. The student was 18 years old. Her parents had cyberbullied her about her sexual orientation publicly on Twitter. And after I properly reported the incidents as required by law and Broward School's policy, I was charged with professional misconduct for possibly contributing to that student's homosexuality. This case got investigated. Ridiculous. I don't understand. Someone please explain to me how a teacher at Cypress Bay is allowed to sleep with an 18-year-old student. It's okay. He still has his job. But I was investigated for contributing to the homosexuality of a student? That's insane. Okay, this is allowed. Someone please needs to explain to me why there is still no investigation into John Marlowe. 9 months ago, I began writing this body. 9 months. I warned you that things would happen at Deerfield. What happened 3 weeks later? A student was sexually assaulted. At what point do you choose to take any action? Recently, I called and requested public information about the SIU cases that had been filed at Deerfield Beach High for the last 5 years. This was supposed to be a matter of public record. David Gold responded with the number of 5 cases over 5 years. I know of more cases than that in 2. So I expressed that. When I questioned it, I got 8 cases on 5 years. I still know of more. And that was in 2 years, not 5. So what I'm now requesting is that parents and teachers have a right to know how many cases have been filed by a principal or a school, cleared, and action taken for each schools. Students, parents, and teachers have a right to protect themselves. This information needs to be posted on the website listed for each school. When are your anti-bullying policies going to mean anything? Because right now they mean nothing. How can you support the lesbian, gay, bi, and transgender students, and this case of mine could even be investigated? It tells me that Broward School is even in a bigger mess than the indictment indicated a few years ago. Everything is just paper until you take some action. I never went even public until student safety was an issue. I wrote several school board members and Mr. Runcie warning them of the unsafe conditions at Deerfield Beach High and expressed my fear that something bad was going to happen. Unfortunately, I had to live with the fact that 3 weeks later a student was sexually assaulted. She was then violated by administration who told her she should get over it because she wasn't raped by a male administrator. The levels of corruption in this district are absurd. If Broward Schools police can lie about the number of cases, which is supposed to be a matter of public record, that's the SIU department, then it needs to be dissolved. And Mr. Runcie, if you can't keep your word regarding something as simple as an investigation, then sir, you need to resign. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Mary Furtick.
Oh, it's recording.
part of something obviously anywhere near this traumatic. And so I'm hearing the gunfire in the hallway, and I'm thinking in my mind, I'm in the first classroom. Why isn't he coming? You know, I'm thinking we're next, and you know, and in my mind I'm thinking, you know, as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, what are your thoughts? What are your, you know, and I'm thinking that I have to almost be their parent. Like I have to tell them, you know. So I said to them, I said, I need you to know that I love you all very much, and that it's going to be okay, because I thought that was the last thing they were ever going to hear. I thought we were all going to die. You know, and I don't know if that's okay, you know, teachers, and, you know, but I wanted them to know someone loved them, and I wanted that to be one of the last things they heard. Not the gunfire in the hallway. It's so horrible. So horrible. Horrible.
How did you know you were going to be okay? What
I
happened?
didn't. What finally happened was the gunfire stopped. The gunfire wasn't that long, so that stopped, but I said, no, we're not going anywhere. We're staying here until someone good comes in, gets us out. So eventually what happened was the police came and started knocking, and obviously, I mean,
I feel like
But I want to put you on the cause and effect there. I mean, why was it if it was citizen mobilization that pushed this issue, why was leadership moving away from the issue so devastating to citizen mobilization?
I think that citizen mobilization, there are many people who look at gun violence as a distant issue because it's not portrayed accurately. For one thing, we sort of touched upon and passed the suicide issue.
Yeah, let me put that stat up. More deaths this year, we might have more deaths this year of injuries by firearm than motor vehicle accidents. They're very close to each other for the first time. And you wanted to make a really important point about that 32,000, that's a big number, 32,000 people die from firearms.
Okay, so the point that I think most Americans don't know is that year after year, the overwhelming majority of people who die by guns die by suicide. And if you take the statistic of 32,000 people, usually 18,000 people are killing themselves. A lot of these high-profile mass shootings are they're really murder-suicides.
Yeah.
So the other number is the 11,000, which are homicides. That's the number that we always hear about, and that's the number that's always associated with communities of color, and that's the number that most people think about. And then there's a couple of thousand that are unintentional, you know, shootings or police interventions. So I think there's a massive amount of misinformation about how people are dying by guns. And frankly, there's a lot that we can do. Harvard School of Public Health and Bloomberg School down at Johns Hopkins do a lot of work on the public health approach to gun violence, trying to intervene when there are suicide potentials in these groups of people.
And one of the things we know about suicide via firearm is that it's incredibly lethal compared to many other methods which are unsuccessful. And the other thing we know about suicides is that if someone attempts suicide and fails, there's a very, very good chance that could be their only attempt. They're very successful interventions, and so if you do not give people an easy way to end their own life, there's tremendous hope in treating someone who has a problem. If the firearm is near and it's accessible, the odds are extremely high they're going to be successful in taking their own life, and then of course there's no second chance to intervention. We are awaiting a live press conference from the police authority.
On your life.
That's right. But keep the eye contact on me.
Not on your life.
That's right. And you create that. So when you have a nervous dominant dog and you try to block them, especially the way you have learned to do it, like holding them, you gotta respond back. You don't want her obsessive.
No.
Otherwise, that makes her a very dangerous dog.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you why. Because when an outside dog senses that a dog is nervous, dominant, and obsessive, they become a target. And they know internally that if they are nervous, dominant, and obsessive, they can be attacked. So they anticipate the attack.
Mm-hmm. And that's fearful for her.
Yes, but they have to defend themselves.
Oh, that's what's happening then.
They have to defend themselves before they're being attacked and recognize about the energy that they wear or they use. Because they don't care about them wearing pink, but they do care about what energy they're wearing.
Can Caesar turn this kitten into a pack leader?
This is, I think, a really important chart for Americans things to look at, and this is about violence, not just specifically guns, violence, all violence. This is deaths due to assault in the U.S. versus other developed countries. And you see that's at the bottom are all the OECD countries clustered. So basically every other industrialized country of the 23 countries are all basically in this narrow band, and there is this one massive outlier, massive outlier, which is the United States. Now, partly that's due to the increased lethality that comes with guns. Partly that's due to the fact that we are, relative to other places, a more violent country in the amount of violence we have. And we have, again, very huge geographic distribution in terms of places that are intensely violent, places that are much less violent. Getting back to this question that I left on the table before we went to break. Esther talked about the fact that nothing's going to happen in national politics unless there is a grassroots push. And what is the state of the gun safety movement? I'm using the Congresswoman's term now. A successful intervention should be.